What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shape their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community, I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is Mark Cole. Mark serves as the CEO of Maxwell Leadership Enterprises and has more than 25 years of leadership and team development experience, which uniquely qualifies him to have an integral role and be the champion of the John C. Maxwell legacy. One of the initiatives under Mark's leadership that is key to the expansion of the Maxwell legacy is the Thought Leader platform. As thought leaders, subject matter experts are now a part of the Maxwell Leadership family as speakers and authors who are ambassadors of the Maxwell method of leadership and professional development. The Maxwell Leadership Enterprise is committed to helping everyone lead powerful, positive change through values-based leadership. And as CEO, Mark Cole is the greatest champion of you becoming the best leader you can be.
If your organization, if your culture, if your team were humming, what would that look like? Think of a plane, the cockpit. We know that engine is running at peak performance because the temperature, the oil pressure, the speed. A lot of people want to experience this seeming easy pace, but they have no dashboard. They have no indicators. Get some indicators on what good culture looks like.
Mark, thanks for joining us.
Well, Don, I'm going to tell you this. I have looked forward to this. I've done a lot of things already today, but this was the one I was anticipating. So good to be with you today.
The company that we are going to spend time talking about is one of the great leadership development companies of modern history and has gone through some rebranding to call itself Maxwell Leadership. You're the CEO.
Yeah.
And I wanted you to maybe share with those who are listening the ideas behind this new twist of language and how it's going to come together.
I have the privilege for the last 12 years of ultimately leading all 7 of the companies that John Maxwell owned. John Maxwell's a writer, speaker, has written, 86 different distinct books. There's 36 million hands around the world that has owned a John Maxwell book, that has read it, consumed it. John has done great things, started a lot of companies because of that. Yet everything, Don, that we've done for the last 5 decades, 50 years of leadership that John has been kind of promoting leadership has really been around the persona John Maxwell. John every year releases 1 or 2 new ideas, new thoughts that he's been working on. He releases it in books and speeches. So really every company that we've had up to this point has been some derivative of the persona of the person, John Maxwell. So it was about 4 years ago, John and I started looking and saying, well, is that the end? Our families just celebrated John's 75th birthday. And we started asking our question, is this concepts, I should say, 86 books. Don't tell John I said this concept. There are concepts in there.
Lots of them.
Yes. These concepts, was there a shelf life? We determined, no, it was just a starting point. It was a launching pad, if you will, and that the persona John Maxwell has given the world a set of principles, a set of guidelines, how to better yourself, how to experience success and significance, and how to make the game of growth infinite rather than a buzzer beater final part of your life, you finally arrived. It is an infinite game, this personal growth strategy. We now call that the Maxwell Foundation. So in essence, this new rebranding, this new idea that you were just talking about, it's really a very intentional move to go from persona to philosophy, founder to foundation, because we believe our next 50 years are going to blow anything that's been done up to this point out of the water from a state of brilliance and a result of impact.
You mentioned John's 75th birthday party, which was extraordinary. During that party, there was a celebratory transitionary discussion on the stage where you and John were there. And he used a great sporting analogy to describe a well-done succession plan. Let's listen in on John talking to you on stage at that party.
As you know, Mark has taken on the responsibility of the John Maxwell enterprise, and he's been with me for 22 years and has just been so faithful and such a terrific leader. So what I have tonight that I want to give you in front of all of our friends is the baton. I can tell you right now, the baton should always be passed when the runner's at full strength. Dan, Kathy, you were so right about you and Andrew and the fact that you don't give the baton when you're ready, but when the other player's ready. And Mark, you are ready. You have been a proven leader, a proven friend. And honestly, the best gift I could ever have is somebody like you to carry that legacy on. So I give you the baton. Come.
I have to tell you, Mark, I remember sitting there and I just had chills. The hair on the back of my neck was completely standing up. I can only imagine what that was like for you. But I love that analogy that you can't pass the baton until the other person is running at the right speed. You know, it's not about when you're ready to retire. It's when the person you brought alongside you. Mm-hmm. Mark, after that dinner was complete, 250 people who were in the room selected to be there for that night with John celebrating his birthday. Each one of us was handed a baton.
Yeah.
Each of the people in the room carried the baton because now this belongs to all of us.
I'm so glad that was audio and not visual, because both John and I were kind of wasted at that point of emotion and appreciation and love and excitement about the future. But I've ran 6 marathons, 13 half marathons. I'm a marathon runner. By the way, I'm glad marathons are not always visual either, because I can remember some very difficult finishes. But John is so right in the concept. You run your best marathon not because you are fastest at the beginning, but because you run the pace that is right for the different transition elements of that sport. When you're running a relay, there is a pace that the person that is going to receive the baton to run the next lap is running, that you know they're ready. That's why there's a transition zone. It's won or loss in the transition. I believe that's correct. And I believe it's correct in every transition you and I and every business leader listening to this podcast understands. It's not as much about the correct transition as it is the transition done correctly. That speaks to pace. I mean, that speaks to how you do it and the pace of the person who's receiving the responsibility from the forerunner. That moment, as heavy as it was to be on stage in front of people like Dan Cathy and leaders of Delta Airlines and leaders like Jimmy Blanchard, the chairman of our board over Synovus, true corporate competitors. That's a heavy moment. I'm not going to lie. That was a big moment. But I'll tell you, in one sense of the word, it was a very freeing moment, because we went on right after that visual illustration of a passing of baton that John and I did that night to talk about people like you, Don Yeager, that's actually carrying that baton with me. Because we didn't go from persona to persona. We didn't go from founder to owner. We went from persona to philosophy, from founder to foundation. And Don, this podcast is a part of that foundation. This baton's not so heavy. I got people like Don Yeager carrying this baton with me. I got corporate competitors you've had on this podcast, Joel Manby, Jeff Henderson, Tim Elmore, Valerie Burton. I've got some heavy hitting thought leaders that are helping me carry the baton. So while it felt heavy with responsibility, it felt light with opportunity.
Right. There's a responsibility that all of us have to kind of make sure we don't drop all the really greatness that John has developed.
I'm glad you feel a little of the weight. This podcast has been very effective. Now we both feel the weight. I'm so glad. We are bringing together a community of thought leaders that will absolutely take the pen of John Maxwell and put that pen in 7 other thought leaders. We'll take the microphone that John's been holding for 50 plus years and put that microphone in the hands of 7 other thought leaders. Isn't that true in competition? If the race has been run right by the person that was holding the baton before you, isn't it with great anticipation that the handoff happens to somebody that can't wait to do good on the race that was already started by somebody else? And Don, I'm sitting here as a competitor just going, I am confident we're going to run the race faster, better, and brighter because of the foundation that John has given us.
As the person to whom the baton is handed, how do you get to the right speed? Talk to me about your story getting to the right speed.
Well, what I've noticed, Don, that you pull out of every one of your guests is they just get real. If this is your first time to listen, you need to go back and catch up with this community. And I think that's part of the foundation of the corporate competitor, get real. But I think that's also your interview style, your passion to bring people out. So I'm going to do what so many of your other guests have done. And I'm going to get real. John challenged me over 17 years ago now to get a word for the year, something to focus on. Now, if you're in the personal growth space, that's not a new idea for you, but perhaps some of you have never really seen the responsibility we have to ourselves to be intentional in being better next year than we were this year. My journey to success is just a great degree of intentionality on improving on what I learned, experienced, and failed at the previous year. So I have this word for the year in 2022, the word that I'm trying to live out right now. And Don, I don't know if you even know this, but my word for 2022 is run. Now, that was before I knew John was going to pass the baton in front of 250 plus of my closest friends. I just knew I had to run. Why would I focus on run this year? That's what I've been doing for 22 years, trying to keep up with John Maxwell. What's so different about the focus on the word run this year? Absolutely, run is about pace. I was kind of hoping for the word peace or the word settled this year. When I kind of went into my year-end review where I determined my word, I was kind of looking at a more of a breath kind of a year. Let me feel peace and let me feel settled. And it just kept coming back to me, Mark, this is the year of the run. I wrestled with it, finally settled on it. I'm going to do it. And it was in the first 15 days of 2022 where the significance of pace and run as it applies to 2022 Mark Cole's leadership really began to crystallize. There are 632 meanings of the 3-letter word run. It's the second most defined word in the English language. I didn't know it. So I began to look through the definitions of the word run. For me, it came down to 3 definitions in this idea of pace, getting the right speed. The first one was run, to move faster than a walk. Speaks to pace, doesn't it?
Yeah.
What's the pace that we're going to always be an organization that's moving faster than our competitors? We're not a walking organization. We're not an average organization. Let's run. It's going to be a pace. It's going to be a running organization. The second definition was incredibly intriguing to me, Don. Never having 2 feet on the ground at the same time. Always having 1 foot moving and off the ground. Well, that concept to me meant movement. It's the pace of a leader. We need to always make sure that we are in movement. We're in motion. We're driving toward a desired outcome. The third definition, Don, was absolutely my favorite this year. When something is operating at peak performance according to the design and plan with which it was created, the engine is running correctly. I fly a lot of airplanes. You do too. I can remember a time at 38,000 feet to where all of a sudden the engines died in the plane that I was in. Now, before I noticed that we were going down, before I noticed that we had deviated a little bit, the hum of the engine caught my attention, something's wrong. The design of that plane, there is a sound to the engine when it's running correctly at 38,000 feet. And that particular day, it was not running correctly. Now, at 38,000 feet, there's a challenge. You want it to run correctly. But it's true in mine and your organization, podcast listener. There should be an acute awareness in the ear of the leader on whether the organization is running or humming correctly.
Wow, I like that.
How do you get the right speed? I think right speed is pace. We need to be moving faster than the competitor. We need to be moving at a pace faster than average or a walk. We need to be moving. We don't need to be running in place. I've done some P90X and prepping for my marathons before, and there is nothing worse than running on a treadmill when you're training for a marathon. You never get anywhere, but you sweat a lot not going anywhere.
Right.
Businesses need to be moving in a desired direction, but what's the hum of the engine? What is the hum of the culture? I will tell you, Don, with you, with everything that we're doing, I'm calling it the year of the hum.
That's it.
This is the year of the hum in Maxwell Leadership.
Our responsibility is to all make sure that we are doing things not just at a pace, but also to be in concert.
That's right.
Because if it's not humming, it's not pretty.
That's exactly right. And you and I won't illustrate by humming a tune right now, okay?
Well, humming, you and I might be able to do. Singing, I've heard you, man. I know. I'm not betting on you in any karaoke competition. So, Mark, our leaders wanting to grow through this conversation, how can they discover how to encourage their team to hum? What is a way that you've learned in this process about drawing people together? Give us maybe an action, something that they as leaders can do to make sure that the hum is in fact in proper tune as they are leading their organizations.
What I love about this idea of humming or this idea of consistency compounds, it's surprised results. For us, the year of the hum really comes from a few years ago, distilling down our irreducible minimums. What's the bare necessities that our culture has to exhibit each and every day? I would challenge you that are listening to this today. Envision this year, envision a year in the future. If your organization, if your culture, if your team were humming, what would that look like? We created irreducible minimums, values, non-negotiables some time ago. We're going to always value people. We're going to constantly put ourself on the line that we produce. We are people of value that value people, but we exceed expectation. We had this commitment that happened 3 years ago when we had to cancel a $4.5 million event during COVID on our dime. Not our fault, not our responsibility, but it became easier, much easier, because it was a statement of valuing our people. When I challenge you, the listener, to get this humming engine, get some indicators. Think of a plane, the cockpit. We know that engine is running at peak performance because the temperature, the oil pressure, the speed. A lot of people want to experience this seeming easy pace, but they have no dashboard. They have no indicators. You need your KPIs, your key performance indicators. You need your values prominent. You need your irreducible minimums, the thing that we will or will not allow a team member to do to contribute to being a high-performing teammate. When you get that and you begin to practically be able to articulate what an effective, high-performing culture looks like, you're well on your way to accomplishing a year of the hum. But if you don't do that, you might be humming and just not even realize it. Get some indicators on what good culture looks like.
I love that. Get a dashboard. Make sure that you are attentive to the indicators that will tell you, is the team humming or are you just humming blindly down the street?
Yeah. I've watched you, I've watched John Maxwell, I've watched other leaders inspire greatness in others by painting the picture of greatness, illustrating greatness in other areas, and then loaning their belief that greatness can be achieved by their teammates. And so many times those are great, cute words. We just don't have characteristics or definitions or dashboards to demonstrate that.
Sports are kind of a central theme of this podcast every week. You've already mentioned marathon running and the importance of running. I know you also love golfing and skiing.
Yeah.
And you're a big Georgia football fan. Congratulations, national championship.
Thank you. Thank you.
Talk to me about what sports have taught you as you've made your way through your leadership journey.
Don, I am an avid supporter and avid listener to the Corporate Competitor podcast, and I am a fan of the Corporate Competitor. Okay. So let's just get that out there that it is an honor now to be in a family of product offerings, services, and value add things like this podcast, to consider this a family of what we do and what we celebrate and get behind. And you always bring on these dynamic leaders. Gang, give Don and his team kudos in comments and other things about the people that he introduces us to on his podcast, because it makes us all better. I've listened, Don, and you always bring up the fact that they were the all-star quarterback, or they played basketball in the NCAA or some big thing. And when you gave me the great opportunity to join you, I kind of laughed, because I went to a little small Christian school called Jackson College of Ministries in Jackson, Mississippi. And our sports program was intermural ping pong. Okay. That's what we had right there, Don.
I bet you had amazing backspin, though.
Let me tell you this, put it in podcast land. When Stephanie and I host you and Jeanette at our home, I'm going to beat your butt in ping pong, because I am pretty good at ping pong. But that's it.
That's funny. By the way, so of all the folks we've had, of all the sports we've covered, ping pong you're our first. This is big. This is big.
Don't forget intramural ping pong, by the way.
Right.
We didn't travel with it. But last night, getting home from a pretty long trip, my wife and my daughter showed me videos of my 4-year-old grandson in his first game as a T-baller. There's a new position that I found out in baseball. Run around the field, kind of between shortstop and left field, stand on your head, wave at the girls looking at the cheerleaders, pick some flowers, bring it back to your mom in between innings. I don't know what to call that position, but my grandson introduced me to that position last night in his first T-ball game.
You call it your grandson.
That's what we called it. I might have made the statement to my wife and my daughter, I'm kind of glad I wasn't there cheering for him on this first game, because it looks hopeless at this point. But isn't it true that sports, for all of us, truly gives us this dynamic of team, gives us this dynamic of personal best? I remember my first marathon. I had trained for 18 weeks on the Hal Higdon program, shameless plug for Hal Higdon's training program for a marathon, because it's incredible. The night before my marathon, I started coughing up blood, only to find out 3 days after my first marathon that I had ran with walking pneumonia and bronchial infection. My wife's telling me the night before I began to cough up blood, it was going to be 28 degrees, my first marathon in Kiowa Island. I did pick Kiowa because it was flat. Let's just be really honest. I looked at her and I said, should I run? She said, Mark Cole, you are running this marathon, coughing up blood with whatever's going on in your lungs, because you have worked hard to perform. When it's game time, whether that's in the boardroom for that moment or the night at John's 75th birthday when I was receiving that baton, competitors put all of the setbacks, all the affliction to the side when it's time to play the game that they've been preparing for. That's true, truly, in my sport of marathoning and of ping pong. That's certainly true in this incredible game that I get to play every single day, of rallying a team to be ready when it's game time. It's that fierce determination. It's that ability to get over the setback and perform at peak performance. It's what we see every single championship game and every single championship team. When they say, how does it feel? Most of the time they reflect on the difficulty they overcame to even be present on game day. That would be truly what I would pass along is what I've learned from my intramural ping pong days.
So I would tell you, just listening to you is a great takeaway, and one I'm sure you use in so much of your corporate development, your leadership development is about the power of preparation.
Yeah.
You don't run it for the first time without having done the work. The key is doing the work. How does that play out in the way you lead and encourage those who serve with you on the Maxwell leadership team?
They never challenge you in practice to run 26 miles, 26.2. Don't forget the point two because that last point two is a bear.
Hurts.
It hurts. But they never encourage you to run further than 20 miles because there's something about game day that you need to feel like you're laying more on the line than you ever did before. You are a student of John Wooden. You're a student of athletes around the world. But even in business settings, when you prepare people for the moment, they're prepared, the game plan is good. There's always something that happens on game day in that moment where you got to close the deal, you got to deliver the deal. There's something about a moment when you perform better than you ever did in practice, when you don't walk in and say, I've already done this before, I've already been here. I think that's why there's very few repeats or three-peats. Very rare, Don, as you know, you've written about this for years. There's just not many programs that can pull a repeat off or a three-peat off. And that's because that been there, done that mindset that creeps into winning teams gets in their mind, as you just pointed at, and goes, whoa, I'm not up for the game. For my marathons, every one of them, there's sometimes a personal best. There's sometimes I didn't train as well as I wish I had of. There's other times that I'm doing it in between. There's other times the terrain is very different, but I always find that unique identifier that makes me for the first time be in a place that I need to excel. I remember my first personal best, my first sub 4 hour marathon. 3 hours and 52 minutes. That's my personal best. For all you out there faster than that, please don't put it in the comments. Keep my sense of pride intact, please. I can't even qualify for Boston with that one, by the way. But when I did my first 352, my personal best was my objective. I came out ready to do that 352, so pumped. I started the first 5 miles with a sub 8.5 minute mile. The most I had trained was a sustained 8:45 minute mile for 20 miles.
Wow.
And I came out way too fast. I was too amped. I was too committed that I had to do it. It took me 17 minutes and 42 seconds to complete mile 23. You know why? I had not paced myself because I was so focused on the personal best that I cramped up, had to eat something that I think is disgusting. Bananas should not be eaten by humans. And I had to eat bananas. I had to do all of that to get my lactic acid back out of my legs so that I could even finish the race. Still finished at sub 4, but that was with an 18-minute on mile number 23, 2.5 times my average, because I had lost the discipline of the plan in the anticipation of the best. That's good, but it can come back and backfire if we forsake the plan in the pursuit of the best. But if we don't have a best, I have found the best of plans sometimes don't perform.
I love that. And what a great business lesson, too. You have to have a plan. That's important. But then you have to have the discipline to the plan, making sure that you're staying with it, because lose the discipline and late in the process, you may find yourself maybe not even able to complete if you aren't able to swallow that banana.
That's exactly right.
We'll stick with that. So, another conversation you have had in a number of your podcasts with John, you talk a lot about the huddle.
Yeah.
And in business, huddles are important to us too. Why are you so fascinated with this idea of how huddles work in a sporting environment and what we can learn from them?
Every Monday morning, 7:30, we have 42,800 certified coaches, speakers, trainers in 165 countries around the world. They're all a part of this idea of a Maxwell Leadership certified team member that coaches, speaks, and trains. 2.5 years ago, right in the middle of COVID, we determined that we needed to have a Monday morning huddle. And now for 2.5 years, every Monday, 7:30, we do a huddle for about 15 to 20 minutes. I'm a big Denver Bronco fan. My wife's a big Denver Bronco fan, but I'm even bigger Peyton Manning fan. And my greatest surprise in my life with my wife, whom I love tremendously, I surprised her with a proposal in Colorado on Pikes Peak. It was powerful. She was not expecting it. It was a moment. We still share that moment today. The second greatest surprise I gave her was a end zone ticket that would ultimately put us right there with the post-game celebration of Super Bowl 50, the Super Bowl where Peyton Manning, as a Denver Bronco, her favorite team, won the Super Bowl. It was epic, and to this day, I still try to cash in on that, and we're 6 years later. It was epic.
Ride that train, baby. Ride it.
Yes, ride it. What I love about Peyton Manning is the guy never needed a huddle, never needed a huddle. Yet when he needed to break up the cadence of the game or when something wasn't working right, you know what Peyton would do? The same thing we do as business leaders. He'd say, okay, come back in here. Let's huddle. I have no idea what they talked about in the huddle. I've met Peyton several times, as you have, Don. One day I'm going to ask him, but I doubt it was calling the play because he always called it at the line. There was something about that huddle. It communicates familiarity. It communicates continuity. It communicates family to the team. You want to know where you can find our leaders? Every Monday morning, 7:30, they're going to be right there describing to us what they're thinking, what they're doing, what they're envisioning. I'm a big believer in change and busting things up. I'm also a big believer that a team needs to know they can depend on leaders. A huddle is as much about consistency and presence as it is anything else. And as crazy as it is, maybe it's a social media inspired phenomenon. People want to know what the leader is doing and thinking. It's a little eerie sometimes. I don't think a lot of times people want to know what I'm thinking. It's not worth a whole lot. But I have found when we get on there and say, hey, this is what John Maxwell and I, and now Don Yeager, what we're doing this week, where we're at, what we're trying to accomplish, there is a sense of buy-in because they get to hear it first as a team member that's in the huddle. You really can give those game time play-by-play instructions that make you fresh and relevant to that week's activity and that week's desired outcome. But don't miss the first 2 points, the consistency of the huddle, the ability to hear what the leader is thinking as far as the game plan and the focus for the week is a big thing that makes us believe that the team huddle we have on Monday morning is one of the most important things that we do.
I love it. And I totally agree with you that I appreciate that there is an awful lot of NFL teams have gone away from the huddle. But the truth is, when they do come together, there's a purpose for it. I had the chance to talk to Coach Mike Krzyzewski. You may not know this, Mark, but he has a video recording of their huddles during games, and they grade each player by how engaged the player is in the huddle because they've noticed that too often, if you know that the play is not going to involve you or you're not going to be an important part of what might happen in the next 5 minutes, you might check out, stand in the back and just kind of chill. You never know who's going to be needed in the next short period of time. Everyone has to be engaged.
Beautiful. I did not know that, Don, and that is incredible. Power of the huddle.
We've thought about that in our own company. Gosh, imagine what would happen if we put a camera up in our meeting room and said, we're going to grade everybody based upon, are you on your phone checking Instagram at the time that
Yes.
we're all trying to decide how we're going to attack the future? You know, Mark, on the Maxwell Leadership website, there's so much great blog material, and you've written a fair share of it. You had a piece in which you talked about a study by Stanford about how we learn.
Mm-hmm.
Most people, 89%, are visual learners. Some are auditory learners. 1% learn by using other senses. How can we use information like that to think about how we're communicating with our teams, how we're leading our teams?
Harder now than ever before in a corporate context is visual leadership. We've come to this place to where visual leadership is a little 5-inch screen right in front of us. or number of likes. Popularity has almost become leadership. Visual is how well somebody scrolls your feed. Visual leadership is presence. How well are you communicating presence like availability to your team? How well are you doing that? How present does your team feel you as a leader are? I travel a lot. I work hard. I do bi-monthly videos. I try to stay in front of our team. The biggest thing that we as leaders can do to be visual communicators, visual teachers, is to be present alongside of engagement as a sister. How well you as a leader are engaging in the business. We call engagement product of the product. It's an internal term, really. For you to be believable as a visual learner, people's got to believe what you're doing more than what you're saying. I've seen a lot of people that says, do as I say, not as I do. And it is the same thing that leadership is caught. It's not taught. Leadership is experienced. It's not explained. We've got to, as leaders, understand that our people are watching us, especially when you don't think they are. In the month of April, John and I did a lot of West Coast all weekend leadership experiences. I do not have enough digits, hands and fingers, to tell you the number of times that I would red eye back to the office and work an entire day in the office on a Monday after a grueling schedule on the weekends. Why? I could have got my work done on the plane. I could have got my work done at home. My presence, my commitment to the organization needed to be felt with a visual representation.
Powerful.
When I started with John in the year 2000, we were an events company at that point. 4 years later, I found myself responsible for customer service, how our customer engagement was doing, feedback. And I discovered Gallup had done a study that of all the people that go to events, only 12% can tell you something tangibly they're doing that has altered their life and leadership 30 days after an event.
Wow. 12%.
12%. Here's what's even more staggering. Gallup did a poll and over 81% would give the event a 10 out of 10. It was worth their time investment of money and schedule.
And yet they weren't doing anything with what they were learning.
81% said, I'm highly satisfied. 12% said 30 days later, I'm doing anything of substance with what I learned at something that gave me an 81% satisfaction. I did our own internal poll. I surveyed 1,000 of our customers. This was back in 2004. Boy, we were doing good compared to Gallup. 96% of the people would walk away from our events and say, I'm highly satisfied, 10 out of 10. It was worth my time and money. We had 26% at the end of 30 days that said, we're doing something substantive with what we learned. You go out 6 months and ask people the question, what did you like most about the Maxwell event that you went to 6 months ago? Less than 50% can tell you anything they even learned, much less an action that they are applying. You can be great with your communication. You can be incredible as you are, Don, with your podcast and how we want to be even better because of your influence with our podcast. But at the end of the day, leadership is caught through visualization, not through some cute speech or some wonderful idea that you implant in people. It's going to be better when they see products of the product that are actually living out your product real time.
What can we do with those numbers, those of us who are leaders, to increase the amount of impact we're leaving behind when we walk out of the room?
When you get an inner circle, people that you're really diligently working with, they need to be in proximity to you. They need to watch you when the emotion of being on is off and you're just resting and recouping. You almost need a commitment that you're going to get to see the entire full spectrum of leadership. They've got to experience it. Leadership is caught, not taught. With big events where that's not possible to everyone, I'm constantly asking myself, what is the one thing I want people to do with what they just experienced? What is the one thing I want people to do with what I just taught? And I'm constantly giving people a clear action item. And then I ask them to share it with somebody so that I'm giving them accountability. And then I'm asking for a report, a scoreboard, if you will, 7, 14, 21 days down. How will we know we won with this time invested? Who's going to hold us accountable to make sure that we're still winning? And then give me a report. Come back and give me visibility into the impact of this meeting somewhere down. And so I'm constantly looking for ways to deliver those three things into any leadership experience or any leadership transfer.
Accountability.
Yep.
We want to make sure we're being held there. You invited Warwick Dunn to the Maxwell annual Live to Lead event, the Super Bowl of leadership events.
Yeah.
I had the honor of introducing him. His story is incredible. Listeners, if you don't know Warwick's story, we had him on episode 37. He teaches that in life, you're going to face adversity. In those moments, you can choose bitter or better. And he encourages to always choose better. I know your journey. I know some of what you've been through. Can you talk about how you've developed greater character through adversity?
Adversity doesn't always guarantee character. It doesn't even always guarantee developing character, but it does always reveal it. And so many times people go, man, I need to go through some adversity. It'll develop my character. Not always. Adversity will always reveal your character. As I look back to some of the most significant and challenging times in my life and leadership, it has been in my response to adversity, not even necessarily the adversity, not necessarily the difficulty, not necessarily whether anybody knew about my adversity. It's not even the level of the adversity. It's what we do from an internal perspective that really helps us develop it into something significant. I've watched people with the worst kinds of difficulty from the pandemic. Don, I watched you from a health standpoint deal with COVID in a very real health crisis. Talked to you a couple of times during that. I got the same Don then as I get today. COVID probably developed something, and most leaders do find a nugget to pick up into adversity, but it reveals you. And I found in that moment of squeezing you and your health, it's the same Don Yeager. What I want to be true, and the times that I handled adversity correctly is when the people go, yep, that's Mark. I knew you'd get through this. The times I didn't handle it well is, whoa, what happened to you? It's the times to where I don't stay true to myself that really reveals something within me. I've had COVID 3 times, nowhere near the magnitude of you, Don, nowhere near. And that's not a statement of comparison. Physically, I came through with flying colors, whatever that means, with losing days of my life. But I'll tell you the third time, which was absolutely the least impacting to my health, was the worst adversity that I had because I lost my mental composure. I was done. I was frustrated. I had done everything I could. I had taken all shots, all boosters. I'd taken everything that could be taken, mask, social distance. I did it all. And here I was, third time, every variant. I've got a taste of it. Some people are chick magnets. Some people are wealth magnets. I am a COVID magnet. The last time, Don, was my most troubling time. I lost my hopefulness. I lost my excitement to continue to push and work through it.
To hear you say that you handled it poorly is fascinating to me because I remember sitting there thinking you were handling it magically.
Yeah.
You were committed to handling your adversity in a way that others wouldn't sit and go, gosh, well, that's out of character, because to me, it was exactly in character. So, wow, thank you for sharing that because I did not know.
It illustrates and underscores the point I want to make about adversity. My ability to fake you out, that adversity is not bothering me, speaks more to my ability to pose and fake than it does to really lead. The greatest indicator of how you're doing in adversity comes from within first. It's the questions we ask within us. Everybody's got adversity. You're not the lucky child because you got a lot of adversity, but not everybody handles adversity the same. And I want to be someone that handles adversity and demonstrates who I really want to be and demonstrates who I want to become because of the difficulty I go through.
Wow, powerful. You know, Mark, There's so much goodness happening at Maxwell Leadership. I want to make sure we're promoting the Maxwell Leadership podcast. How can they connect with you, with the organization, and inspire their own growth?
One of the most favorite things that I do within Maxwell Leadership is our podcast. It's a value add. Our one single attempt in that podcast is to deliver something to each person that will impact them to grow and lead better. If you will go to maxwellpodcast.com, you can actually Google Don Yeager. Don, you've done 3 or 4 podcasts so far. There's a lot more coming, and you'll see a lot of other content out there. It's free. It's yours. Whether it's a podcast, whether it's a training curriculum, whether it's getting a speaker like you, Don Yeager, or one of our other thought leaders to come and add value to your organization, there's one thing I can promise you is going to happen. We're going to add value to you because we value you. We are people of value that adds value to people. We're committed that no matter what level of engagement that we have with you, from podcasts to a multi-million-dollar training contract that we have with organizations, our responsibility day in and day out is to add value to leaders who will multiply that value to others. Don, it's why John Maxwell and I love you being on our thought leader team.
Mark Cole, there is a reason why John Maxwell handed you the baton, and it is not your ping pong backhand. You deliver. It's an honor to have you here today. It's an honor to be able to call you today's corporate competitor.
Thank you very much, Don.
Boy, I have to tell you, with Mark Cole taking the reins of this new opportunity, I am so excited to be part of Maxwell Leadership. But what I loved about handing the baton is this idea about transition, and how many of us have gone through some level of transition, and how often transitions fail. But they fail because someone's doing it at the time that's right for them, not necessarily at the time that's right for all. Success is defined, it's won, it's lost in transition, and that it has to be done correctly. What a good discussion, something that many of us might think about as we're thinking about our own teams. He had so much content around the importance of developing great leadership, and that popularity is not leadership. Too often, from a measurement standpoint, we're trying to be the most popular person in the room. That's not leadership. That's the contest that we shouldn't be truly just seeking to win. Finally, I loved his discussion around having indicators, a dashboard that tells you, are we humming together? What is it that we are trying to bring collectively? And are we delivering on those important measurement tools that will indicate to others that we are, in fact, bringing value into their lives? Today was a great day for me personally, because I'm even more committed than I might have ever been before by listening to the story, the vision of where Maxwell Leadership is headed, and where we all get to go as we are developing ourselves as corporate competitors. If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yeager, who did that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man? Great, sir.
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. We are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code podcast at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager, Yaeger, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.